Welcome to another episode of Classic Dallas Cowboys Talk. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. Jesus Christ is Lord. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen. Let's get right to it. So, that was a pretty humiliating beat down. We went into our bye week. It's obviously we have some things to fix. We have a lot of things to fix offensively and defensively. Yet, despite all that has happened, we're still 3-3, and we are still one game out of first place behind 4-2 Washington, who just had a big loss defensively. Jonathan Allen tore his pec muscle, the star defensive end for the Commanders. Excuse me, the Redskins. It doesn't sound right. Commanders don't sound right. So Jonathan Allen tore his pec for the Redskins. Dan Quinn called it a huge loss. So despite all of that, we're still 3-3, one game out of first place. Believe it or not. And so we got some things to fix offensively and defensively. And I think about we came at the right time because, man, we have got to clean up. We have got to clean up. Okay. So, speaking of cleaning it up, or maybe not cleaning it up, David Shula was the first offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys when Jimmy Johnson first got there in 1989. He was the offensive coordinator in 1989 and 1990. Okay. So, Cowboys obviously went 1-15 in 1989. And so through the first half of the 1990 season, things were getting a lot better, despite drafting Emmitt Smith, despite acquiring John Gesicki from the Raiders, offensive lineman, part of the Great Wall. Things were getting much better, okay? And Aikman said he was frustrated the first half of 1990, okay? So where would the blame fall, okay? So, at first, blame fell on Aikman, because, he was inconsistent. He could throw for 3 touchdowns one week and he could throw 3 interceptions the next week. So that's where the blame first fell. But ultimately, the players knew. The players on offense knew who was to blame. It wasn't Aikman. It was David Shula, the offensive coordinator, okay? So, the offense, the players were completely fed up with David Shula. And they went to Jimmy Johnson and said, hey, this dude right here, he ain't it. David Shula, he ain't it. Okay? And so, Ray Alexander, who was a former Cowboys receiver, was cut in training camp by Jimmy Johnson, said, David Shula, that guy, he was a true butthead, okay? AKA, that guy was a asshole. David Shula was a real asshole, okay? They were saying he was not a viable offensive coordinator. He could tutor like 1AA tight ends. He looked like somebody who could sell insurance or manage a steakhouse. And around the league, he was viewed around the NFL as a lightweight. Okay, so when Jimmy came to the Cowboys in '89, he went to Don Shula, Daddy Don Shula. So I don't confuse David and Don. He went to Don Shula and said, "Hey, can I hire Dave Wannstedt as my defensive coordinator?" Now, Dave Wannstedt had recently been hired as a defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. But Don Shula gave his permission to talk to Dave Wannstedt. And Jimmy Johnson brought in Dave Wannstedt. But Daddy Don also said, hey, you got to take my son, David. Because Don believed that David needed to make it on his own as an offensive coordinator, offensive coach, or whatnot. So Mark Stepnoski had this to say. Everyone knew what the deal was, okay? Why else would we hire the guy? Because David's last name was Shula, okay? He actually played, David actually played in the NFL. He was a kick returner for the Colts in 1981. He actually went to law school. But shortly thereafter, he joined the Miami Dolphins and his dad, where he stayed there for until 1989 when Daddy Don requested to take David with Dave Wannstedt to Dallas, okay? And so the schemes were simplistic, low risk, and Troy Aikman hated the offense. He hated David Shula's offense, okay? Kelvin Edwards, another Cowboys receiver, said nobody bought into what the head guy was doing. In other words, Troy Aikman didn't buy into what he was doing. Emmitt Smith didn't buy into what he was doing. The offensive line didn't buy into what he was doing. He was the guy who caused us to lose so many games. Kelvin Edwards went on to say, okay? So, the Cowboys went 1-15 in 89, but David Shula wasn't the sole reason why Dallas went 1-15 in 89. The defense wasn't good. The defense was slow. But more problems on offense began to arise. In training camp 1990, when David Shula was urging Jimmy Johnson to cut Michael Irvin, okay? He was in Jimmy Johnson's ear trying to get him to cut Michael Irvin. But Jimmy said, you know what? Irvin is a Miami Hurricane. David, you're not. So he kept Michael Irvin. Kept Michael Irvin on the Cowboys, and we all saw what Michael Irvin became. Okay. And so I think the players were really over David Shula in week 3 of the 1990 season when they went to Redskins at RFK. That's the game where Troy Aikman threw. That's the game where Todd Bowles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers coach Todd Bowles. Yes, that Todd Bowles, he played for the Redskins at that time. He picked off Troy Aikman at the end of the game to win the game for the Washington Redskins. Okay. So, but there was a point, but during the week leading up to the clash with the Redskins, David Shula said, we're going to surprise the Redskins by huddling up on the sidelines, calling the play, and sprinting to the line of scrimmage and running the play. We're going to surprise the Redskins by huddling up on the sidelines, calling the play, and sprinting to the line of scrimmage and run the play. Rob Awalt, who came to Dallas during the preseason to trade with the Arizona Cardinals, had this to say. He said, you feel like a goober, okay? His play call in sounds like something a bad high school coach would run, okay? But even worse, we would run a fullback dive, okay? When your offensive coordinator can't get out of his own way, it's even more brutal, okay? So, and Emmitt Smith had his gripes about the offense. Emmitt felt he wasn't being used properly. And Troy Aikman, who would love to throw the ball 40 times a game, said, hey, why is the rookie getting ignored? Why is he getting ignored? Okay. So Week 5, Smith had 121 yards on 23 carries versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Okay. Against the Cardinals in Week 6, he was back down to 12 carries. In the rematch with Tampa Bay, he had 16 carries. That's a game where Isaac Holt had a pick 6 and Troy Aikman threw the game-winning pass to Michael Irvin. Okay. But they lost to the Jets. They lost to the Eagles, the Jets, and the Niners. And in those 3 straight losses, Smith averaged only 11 carries. And he went to Joe Brodsky, okay, the running backs coach, and explained his situation to Joe Brodsky, okay. And David Shula blamed Emmitt Smith for missing a block versus the Cardinals in the loss to the Cardinals that cost the Cowboys a game. And Smith remembers Joe Brodsky saying something like this. Needed to gain 100 yards against the San Francisco 49ers, okay? But 11 carries, that ain't gonna do it. Nah, so Joe Brodsky agreed that David Shula, he was just lame, unimaginative, and corny. Dave Shula was a corny offensive coordinator at best, okay? And against the Cardinals, where he had 12 carries, he averaged 4.4 yards a carry, okay? And so Joe Brodsky believes David Shula was corny and lame. And so David Shula finally listened to his players. And 24-21 against the Rams. 27-17 over the Redskins. They beat the Saints as well. Then they beat the Cardinals in the rematch, 41-17. That's when Emmitt Smith had 4 touchdowns, okay? But I think it was pretty obvious that the Cowboys players offensively were over David Shula, okay? And he went to Cincinnati as a receivers coach, where they ended up playing the Cowboys during the 1991 season, where they won. The Cowboys won 35-23 at Texas Stadium, okay? Then their paths crossed again in 1994 when they played the Bengals at the jungle, at what they call, quote, the jungle, okay? And that was the game where Barry Switzer compared the winless Cincinnati Bengals to the winless Iowa State college football team. Okay, so the Bengals had a receiver by the name of Darnay Scott, who ended up playing for the Cowboys later in the new part of the early millennium, 2002. He burned Larry Brown a couple of times early in that game. The Bengals had a 14-0 lead. Cowboys came back and won the game 23-20. And after the game, it was alleged that David Shula went up to Barry Switzer and said, "You can take Iowa State and shove it up your ass." Okay. That's what David Shula said to Barry Switzer post-game, okay? But, yeah, David Shula was corny. So, yeah. All right, that's it. And that's all for Classic Cowboys Talk. I'm out of here. Peace out. God bless. How about them Cowboys?